What? Yeah, we're getting violence free. Seconds before the hour. 3, 2, 1.
We're talking violence.
The culture of peace is largely anchored on democracy and the paramountcy of rule of law. Education, therefore, must not just be fixated on the fundamentality of peace to all humankind or a mentality of non-violence, but rather, emphasis must be on the involvement of all in the process of peace building. My name is Kali Ikwe, and on that note, I welcome you to our program, Talking Violence. Our program today will be featuring a very special interview we had with a veteran diplomat, Sir Emeka Anyaoku. Your Excellency, you're welcome to the program. Generally, sir, what is your take on what is going on today in the country?
Well, I am concerned at the incidence of violence that's going on in the country. It's not only Boko Haram, which is there and inflicting great damage to life and property. We now have the militants in the Niger Delta who are very active. And we also have the Fulani herdsmen who've been inflicting a great deal of damage to farmers in parts of the country. And increasingly we have we have in the southeast, the young people who are agitating for the resuscitation of Biafra. And the possibilities of the spread of this violence exist, and that worries me.
Okay, sir, but many people are under the impression that violence presents a quicker way of getting reckoning, of getting attention. Violence is profitable in other way. They say things and then nobody's listening to them. As soon as they they take to arms, they're beginning to call them to discuss with them. Do you believe that violence actually is that the right way to go?
No, I do not believe in violence in any form. The only type of violence that I judged justifiable was violence in the liberation movements. When the liberation movements, particularly in Southern Africa, were there, they had no option but to take up arms to fight for their freedom, whether it was in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, or then eventually South Africa. That sort of violence seemed understandable to me, and I was in support of that. But violence in established polities is to be avoided. I do not believe that you could attract greater attention through violence. What is happening in our country, it could be said that in some cases people have attracted attention and received favorable treatment as a result of violence. But I think that it behooves the government, it behooves the authorities to preempt violence by addressing the causes, the grievances that lead to violence.
Do you think government's approach to it presently, are they not indirectly encouraging this act by indirectly rewarding them? The whole contracts have been given to people, amnesty has been given in the past, and people will enjoy some kind of patronage and attention, and suddenly they are big people now. They are rich, they are wealthy. Don't you think government is indirectly encouraging this?
No, I believe that what the government was seeking to do was to address the basic cause of the grievance. In the Niger Delta, for example, where the grievance is based on the fact that the Niger Delta is the source of the revenue that upholds this country, while at the same time suffering great environmental degradation. And they took up, that was their basic grievance. And the government, in introducing the amnesty program, for example, was seeking to address that basic grievance. And then by awarding contracts to members of the militant groups, I thought they believed that they were addressing the basic grievance. But I do not support myself the idea of awarding contracts on the basis of capacity to cause violence. No, I think that would be wrong.
There's a perception around present state of insurgency or militancy in the Niger Delta is a case of a group of other young men saying this is our time to take advantage of the situation. Those other ones have come and gone and have gotten theirs. It's our time to get our share. So they've come up now, where if you even reward them, another set will come in. If you were the president, what would you rather do in this case?
No, I think that the federal government is initiating a dialogue with the communities in the Niger Delta that are most severely affected by the operations of the oil companies, and that is the route to take. I believe that it's important to engage the communities most affected by the operations of the oil companies, and by dialoguing with these communities, ways will be found to address the issue of rehabilitation of the environmentally destroyed means of livelihood in these areas. I'm told that in these areas, farmers and fishermen no longer can farm or fish because the grounds and the waters where they fish have been heavily polluted by crude oil, mismanaged by the oil companies. They've been doing in this international oil companies seem to be operating in this country in a manner that they will not be allowed to operate in many other oil-producing countries. And if the government is engaged in dialogue with the communities, dialogue intended to address these degraded environments, that would be a very good thing. I was glad to see the other day that the federal government, the vice president, was in the Niger Delta to launch a project in accordance with the UN body recommendation on the rehabilitation of the Ogoni area. I think that's the right approach to take.
3, 2, 1.
We're talking violence.
Viewed against the current agitation in the eastern part of the country for the state of Biafra, I don't know, and if this is not properly handled, as perceived by others, that it could snowball into another civil war.
Well, I believe in a united Nigeria, one Nigeria as a political entity. I believe that there is no part of this country that will not gain from remaining part of a united Nigeria. But at the same time, I have been saying that one way of ensuring stability and progress in this country is to restructure the present governance structure of this country. I do not believe that as presently structured, that we can achieve political stability. The agitations will continue in different parts of the country. I think these 6 geopolitical zones should be the basis of federation, and we should have a truer federation. What we have at the moment is an overbearing center, the federal government, which is a constitution that was derived from the command structure of the army. The federal government is so powerful, and the federating units, the 36 federating units, are by far too weak. They are not viable economic development units. They would have greater development capability if we were operating a truer federation of 6 federating units with powers appropriately devolved to them. Take, for example, in the area of security. I think that the idea of one federal police, it's not a workable idea. If you had the regions, and the regions responsible for policing their security, you're more likely, in fact, you're surer of getting effective policing than what we have at the moment.
And when these federating units, these geopolitical zones are eventually maybe demarcated as such, they should also have the privilege of choosing a proper nomenclature for themselves, not a case where you're arbitrarily named Northeast, Northwest, like North Central. What is Central about being North or Northeast, Southeast?
Well,
or that?
I believe that that will come once you begin the process of negotiating a restructuring of this country, where the regions will perhaps choose to call themselves different names. But the important thing is that there will be regions within one Nigerian federation.
Fantastic. Your Excellency, at some point in your life, you may have had a direct experience with violence. Maybe when you were much younger, something that touched you to this day. Maybe outside of official life, something very personal.
Well, as a young man, as a young undergraduate at the University College of Ibadan, I took part in a number of protests, but they were really non-violent protests. And we were never fired upon by the police. The police checked us, contained us, but never fired us. They never used arms to fire at us. So I don't think I can claim to have been involved.
Violent? Did you get violent at some point?
Not really, not really. The most, I suppose the nearest we ever came to violence was when the fence of the women's hall in the University College of Ibadan was destroyed because students were protesting against the banning of students, male students going to the women's hall. That was the nearest thing we ever came to violence. But as I said, it was essentially a non-violent protest.
Okay, all right, that's interesting. Now, Your Excellency, at some point, there's this issue of cultural violence too. Violence is not just physical bruise, I believe. Instead, what would you make of some artists centering or focusing on lewdness and denigration of women in order to win attention, to get attraction, to get for commercial purpose? Is it kind of practice that you approve of?
Of course not. I mean, the exploitation of women for any purposes, whether it's commercial purposes or to win a point in any struggle, I condemn, and I condemn very fully. And indeed, returning to the issue of violence, perhaps I would give you the example of what happened in this country when I brought together in consultation with the then Senator Ben Obi, who was political advisor to President Jonathan, it had become clear to me that the violence in the electoral campaigns were likely to get out of hand. And secondly, it seemed clear to me that if the elections were held and if Buhari lost the elections, there was bound to be violence in wider part of this country. And on the other hand, if Jonathan lost the election, that there was bound to be violence, particularly in the Niger Delta. So, in consultation with Senator Ben Obi, I chaired a workshop that brought all the presidential candidates together. There were 14 of them, but the principal two were General Buhari and President Jonathan at the time. And discussed, and I drafted what came to be known as the Abuja Accord, which was signed by all the presidential candidates, including Buhari and Jonathan. In my presence, I was the principal witness. And in that accord, they committed themselves and their political parties to non-violence, to minimizing violence in the political campaigns, and also, more importantly, to accepting the results of the elections, freely and fairly conducted. And so when the elections were completed, and President Jonathan was magnanimous enough to accept the result and concede victory to now President Buhari, that saved this country from what I thought was predictable mayhem. And this was a great achievement by these leaders themselves. First, by Jonathan for conceding defeat, and second, by Buhari by acknowledging what Jonathan had done and reciprocating that peaceful gesture.
3, 2, 1.
We're talking violence.
Interesting. What would be your advice to young people who still think about violence as who want to get involved with violence?
My advice to young people is to articulate their grievances, articulate their objectives, and seek to dialogue with the powers that be, with the authorities on this. I mean, they should start locally and state-wise and zone-wise, and then go to the federal. They must first articulate their grievances, seek opportunities for discussing their grievances with the powers that be. And I'm sure that the powers that be will continue to be encouraged by elders such as myself and a good many other elders of the society to dialogue with these young people and find ways of addressing their genuine grievances. For example, the unemployment level in this country is something that should be worrying the leaders of this country. This country, young graduates for 2, 3, 4 years without jobs, and the unemployment at the level of the rural areas and so on. These are things that the government should prioritize and seek to deal with. I believe the government is trying to deal with it, but perhaps not seriously enough, in my view. They should make that a priority, how to create opportunities for employment for the young people of this country.
As you must have heard from that interview, the processes involved with attaining a sane society are very, very possible if we remain committed to the cause. Yes, my name is Kali Ikpe, and until same time next week, God bless you and stay on the lane to a violence-free Nigeria.
Fighting over Gemini and Pisces. Every corner it's war and crisis. Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda and ISIS. How come the poor people are the nicest? Africa blessed with a lot of beautiful history, but these people make us feel like everything's a mystery. They make us live lives in a jittery. We pray to God Father to give us victory. Take a look around the city now. No love or what a pity now. 21 look like 50 now. Hatred making, you know. Back then she was a cutie now. You no longer do your duty now. You follow girls with big booty now. All you do is booting and looting now. So
Heal the world, heal the world. Spread love and heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. Let love heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. Spread love and heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. Let love heal the world.
Sickness is the touch but not deep enough. I'm mother dying of deep enough. Father not get no deep enough. She a feeling school oh deep enough. False prophet them preaching now. Fake thing them teaching now. The girl them bleaching now. And the boy them snitching now. Who am I to do the judging now? When everything is not original. Bad mind and grudging now. Father Lord it in a put me now. So
Heal the world, heal the world. Spread love and heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. Let love heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. Spread love and heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. Let love heal the world. Oh, 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 oh,
heal the world, heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. What I say? So
heal the world, heal the world. Spread love and heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. Let love heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. Spread love and heal the world. Heal the world, heal the world. Let love heal the world. Oh, 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 oh,
let's send love to every length and breath. Let's show love while we're still alive, not in death. All for love, I say.